Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. I am so glad that you could join me for today's session. I also hope that you have been keeping warm and well during these last few weeks of really bad, cold, wintry weather. Well, today we're continuing our study of big names in the Bible, and today we're going to focus on a woman named Esther. Now, there's a book in the Bible that bears the name of Esther, and this is her story. As the story goes, Esther was a young Jewish girl, and her parents died. That meant that she was an orphan. And the only relative she had was a man named Mordecai, and he lived in Persia, quite a long ways away from the Promised Land. Well, since he was Esther's only relative, Esther went all the way to Persia to live with him, and eventually she became Mordecai's adopted daughter. Now, as the story goes, through an unusual turn of events, Esther became the queen of Persia. She was married to the king, a man named Ahasuerus. Well, this was a completely unexpected development, but it would turn out to be a very timely and important development. Here's why. Shortly after she became king, Ahasuerus appointed a man named Haman to be his prime minister. Now, Haman disliked all Jewish people, and as soon as the king put him in this position of power and authority, he began to work to try to find a way to get rid of all the Jews in Persia. He wanted to kill them all. And eventually, he was successful in persuading King Ahasuerus that he should issue a decree proclaiming that all the Jews all over Persia, men, women, and children, that they should all be put to death. Well, when Queen Esther heard this, she was very, very troubled. And so she sent for her uncle Haman, and Haman came to her uncle Mordecai, and Mordecai came to the palace, and Esther said, "This is what Haman is planning. What should I do? What should we do?" And Mordecai told Esther very plainly, he said, "Listen, don't think that because you're the queen that you'll be safe. Eventually, the king will find out that you are Jewish, and your life will be in danger." And Esther said, "Well, what should I do then?" And Mordecai just simply said, "Who knows? It could be that for just this moment, for just this time, that you are in this position of influence and responsibility." So Esther said to Mordecai, "Well, here's what I want you to do. Ask all of the Jewish people to pray for me, to fast, to pray, because I'm going to do something to try to save my people." And so Mordecai said, "I'll do exactly that." And so he went and spread the word that all of the Hebrew people should pray and fast, and that they should remember Esther. Well, after several days, Esther put on her finest clothes, and she decided that she would go in and meet with the king. Now, this was dangerous because no one, not even the queen, no one was supposed to enter the presence of the king unless they had been invited. To do so was to put your life in danger. Nevertheless, Esther decided that in order to save her people, it was worth the risk. So Esther, dressed in all of her finery, went and made an appearance in the king's palace and in his throne room. And she waited, wondering if the king would welcome her or if he would immediately sentence her to death. Well, apparently, King Ahasuerus was really pleased and thrilled to see Esther, because he beckoned her to come into the throne room, and then he said, "Tell me what it is that you want, and I'll be glad to do it." Well, Esther had thought about this, and her plan was this. She asked the king to have a banquet, and ostensibly she wanted to have this big banquet and honor Haman. But really what she wanted to do was have this banquet so that she could expose Haman to the king and show the king what an evil man he was. And also to say, if you're going to put to death all of the Jewish people, that means you're also going to have to kill me. Well, the king granted her request. Esther held her banquet, and she brought Haman down, and she saved the lives of all of the Hebrew people then living in Persia. So what are the lessons that we can take from this wonderful, wonderful story? Well, the first is this. Sometimes, as people of faith, we have to act with great courage, even though it may be very, very risky. Not all the time will God ask us to do things that are safe. Not all the time will our faith just ask us to do simple things or easy things. Sometimes, because we're people of God, we'll have to do hard things, things that may mean they'll be costly to us in one way or another. Well, Esther was brave, and she did what the moment asked of her. As well, interestingly enough, the name of God is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. God is not present visibly in the story of Esther as the writer tells it. And so what this tells us is that God shows up and God works not just in the usual way we think about God doing things with signs and wonders or big miracles that leave no doubt that God's doing something. Sometimes God is off stage. Sometimes God works behind the scenes. And that's the case in the story of Esther. God's work and God's purpose was carried out through the actions of ordinary people doing incredibly hard things. God was at work in Esther's life, even though the writer of the book of Esther doesn't show us exactly how God was doing anything. He just simply tells the story of Esther and says, in the actions, the brave actions of Queen Esther, the people were saved. God was at work, but God was working behind the scenes. Wasn't visible to everybody in that day and time. So that's a wonderful story, and if you've never read the book of Esther, I encourage you to do so, to have your parents read it. It's a great story that has lots of wonderful twists and turns. And a matter of fact, it's so important that our Hebrew friends, when they celebrate what is known as the Feast of Purim, which is a wonderfully happy celebration for our Hebrew friends, they always read the book of Esther during the Feast of Purim. Well, that's it for today. I hope you learned something important, something that will help you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, if you have any questions, give me a phone call, send me an email, whatever. Just get in touch with me. I'll be glad to hear from you. And just know that I look forward to seeing you again next week. And in between now and then, God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.